Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. It's a part of the Thought Leadership webinar. So that's me. My name is Manoj Madgula. I am the APAC lead for expensing, having 16 years plus of experience and working in the multicultural environment across Southeast Asia, having experience in the business and solution consulting area. So before we just get started, just a bit of a housekeeping in terms of quick tips for the best webinar experience. I hope you have joined the webinar through a laptop or a PC. That's just for the best experience. Please ensure a stable internet connection, and yes, we will have a question and answer session. So please feel free to post your questions in the question box, and we'll take it up at the end of the webinar. Once again, welcome. So today we have participants from half a dozen countries with 100 plus registrations. And we are presenting on the topic of a new spend management superhighway. In terms of, just to introduce our speaker for the day, you can meet your thought leader for the day. That's Shabir Imani. He has got 30 years of experience in the area of spend and cost management. An expert in international markets for expensing, has been dealing with these markets for quite a few years now, and has been a veteran and a thought leader in the area of spend management. So without much of a delay, over to you, Shabir.
Thanks, Manoj. I was particularly thrilled with as a car lover. I was particularly thrilled with the theme that was selected for this, and therefore the analogy that we have tried to create. Of course, the icing on the cake was the fact that we get to hear the song from Doors, which is all-time classic, as part of that. So I think sometimes we make work too much. We take work too seriously, and there is
Shabir, your volume is slightly lower. Can you please adjust it?
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, thanks. So as I was saying, that sometimes we tend to take, things too seriously because it's business, and there is cause for that. So with that, let's dive right into the topic that we are going to be discussing today. I think the fact right now is that I was recently reading what happened in the World Economic Forum, and subsequent to that, an OECD report which had come out. And one thing that came, or a couple of things which came out common across all of them, let me talk about one first, and then I'll talk about the other across both of them, was the fact that businesses are going to go through an investment cycle right now. Yeah, it may be partly to catch up for all the losses that happened during the whole pandemic issue. It may also be because of organizations now realizing that they need to move faster in order to do what is required in terms of growth. And
Shabir, sorry to intervene. Can you please higher the volume a bit more? Is it possible?
Or yeah, I'll come a little closer so that people can hear better. Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So hopefully, yeah. So what I was saying is they said that the companies which miss out on this investment cycle, which is on this investment cycle which is required at this point in time, are the ones who will be at a significant disadvantage. So what is required at this point in time is for organizations to gather speed, organizations to move with conviction, organizations to go ahead and do the kind of investments and spends which are required, whether it be in sales, whether it be in marketing, whether it be in capacity, whether it be in customer service, whatever is important for different companies based on the businesses they are in, it is important for them to go ahead and do that. And therefore, we talk about the concept of the new super management highway and the need for speed. Are you ready to really go vroom? Life would have been very simple if it was a clear highway like this, no obstructions, nothing to think about. All you have to worry about is your foot on the accelerator, as the Doors song was talking about. But we do live in strange times. So the second part of what both these reports from the World Economic Forum and OECD had in common is the number of challenges that companies are facing. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with those because you will be experiencing some variation of that in your own company. So these include things like, of course, the number one topic of discussion is inflation, the dollar strengthening, and that again coming back into pricing, the commodity prices, which are very high, the huge supply chain disruptions, possibility of the pandemic coming back, and this thing which we are beginning to see in so many countries again. So a whole lot of things are beginning, plus, of course, the geopolitical risk with the Russia Ukraine war, and we getting into a situation where geopolitics and who you do business with becomes important. So I came across interesting terms recently. We had all heard about how in a globalized world everybody is doing offshoring, and then they said, no, we are getting a little less globalized, so we want to do nearshoring and we want to do onshoring. And now things have become so political that people are talking about friendly shoring, which means you work from countries where you have a possibility of working with them a little closely. So when we are in that kind of times, when on the one hand there is a need for growth, and on the other hand there is a need to ensure that these risks are factored in, it's a balancing act, and you need the right kind of management processes and systems in order to go ahead and take care of this kind of situation that we are getting into at this point in time. And hence the balancing of two factors which become very important. To get to your speed, you need the agility, but also in order to the agility is also required so that you can quickly adjust to changing situations as they happen, whether it's for short term or medium term, because long term clearly is growth, but the short term, medium term issues which come up, you need to go ahead and handle that. And on the other hand, you need resilience, so that if something happens which was not expected, do you have the ability to withstand that and move in? So that is the background in which we are talking about, that you are no longer in a situation where you can say, I will just take it easy, I will not take risk. Organizations which do not take a risk will not grow. So as they say, the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. So the need for risk is there, but do you have the risk management and the risk amelioration systems in place to go ahead and do that? And I'm going to talk about that today in the area of spend management. So what we are saying is that yes, you are all set to run on this highway to really catch up speed for everything that has been happening out there, and the pent-up demand that is there for some of your products and services. How do you want to go ahead and take care of that? But you also need to be careful. Yeah. So obviously the basic precautions like wearing a seat belt, keeping safe distance between vehicles, knowing that unexpected occurrences can happen on some of the vehicles ahead, whether they be your competitors, customers, whoever are you giving appropriate signaling when you want to change your strategy or change lane in this case? So are you giving appropriate signaling? Are there the right kind of precautions in place? Like here, I'm talking about the police and the ambulance being ones which go ahead and take care of it. And hence, if you take your organization to be this car, then you need to make sure that this car has good engines and brakes. Engines for you to accelerate, or the agility that we talked about, brakes to ensure that you have the kind of resilience so that if something unexpected happens, you don't get into a situation where you get into either an accident on the highway, or if your systems are not really up to date, you could end up in a situation where you cannot move with the speed that you want. This is a traffic jam, unlike a traffic jam which happens on a highway. This is a traffic jam of your own creation. Your processes are slow, your MIS is not available, the management strategy in terms of where you want to spend, what you want to avoid spending on right now so that you conserve resources for. But the most important thing here is, do you have the proper car to go ahead and do that so that accidents are avoided, traffic jams are avoided, and you have the right strategy to go ahead and take care of things as required. Having said that, what happens typically in an investment cycle? If we try to learn from what happens in past investment cycles, is if you think of the organization as a number of different departments, each department starts going ahead and creating its own this thing, saying, you want me sales team saying, you want me to sell more, I need to connect with more prospects globally, give me more leads, give me a larger team, allow me to expand into more geographies so that I can go ahead and do whatever is required out there. Marketing says, hey, you want more leads, then you need to give me more budget for ads, and so that we can support sales in the way that they are asking for. Their very high expectations out of us. We need the procurement and supply chain team is in the meantime handling the supply chain disruptions, which is such a huge area. In fact, just yesterday I was reading on Bloomberg that Mercedes-Benz trucks talks about this being one of the biggest supply chain disruptions that they've come across. So how do you get new vendors in? How do you reevaluate contracts? How do you make procurement faster? Can you move a lot of things onto contractual buying so that the speed with which the procurement team can operate can get better? In the meantime, the accounts payable team is like, there are so many invoices to be paid. I need to increase turnaround time. Please give me processes and systems to do that. HR is saying, hey, everybody is putting in requests to hire more people. The thing which is common across all of this, is the CFO saying, oh my God, how am I going to maintain profitability with everybody asking for either investments or revenue expenses to go ahead and get incurred. So that, and one thing that he has is, give me a clear strategy of what is a good spend in this area and what is a bad spend in this area. So this is the kind of a situation through every investment cycle that happens. And of course, when external parties like vendors come to know that your processes and systems are not in place, there may be a temptation for them to find loopholes in the way you pay and you process their payments for them. So the CFO has to also guard against that. The procurement team needs to go ahead and guard against that. So this, I hope this metaphor gives you an idea of the kind of complexity which is involved, and therefore what needs to be done. Really, on one hand, it's a fascinating situation because there is an opportunity for growth. It is not like when the pandemic started, but that creates its own complexity. And is your organization, in this case, with the metaphor of the car, is it really ready to take care of these kind of situations? And we personally think that spend management is something which will help in this, because the choices that the CFO has in terms of how should he respond could be slow down spends, can't meet business expectations, in which case be ready for either very poor growth or worse still, competitors going ahead and overtaking you. So this is not something which is a real alternative for you. Another kind of a thing is hire more people. Volumes have increased, everything has gone up. In the past, whenever something like that happened, we went ahead and hired more people in some of these kind of areas, which are all related to the spend management area. And I think with talent, again, one of the key challenges which is also there is, whether you call it the great resignation, whether you call scarcity of talent, whether you talk about the high cost of talent, whichever way you talk about it, this again, which may have been something that you adopted in the past, you need to take a different approach, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So really what the option which is available is, like I said, CFO needs to have controls so that he knows where he's going, which is like this dashboard on his car, so that he knows where he's going, what's the speed, what is the kind of revving that the engine is at, can the engine take that kind of revving, do I have the right kind of brakes, do I have indications of distance from other cars which are around me. Overall thing being, how do I know a way of encouraging good spends in my company and stopping the bad spends which may be happening in my company? How do I go ahead and take care of that? So this may be a strategy that your company may want to take as far as this is concerned. And therefore, I want to talk about a few best practices from our experience in spend management, which we think would help you in this kind of a situation. Before I get into that, it's important to understand that you consider all the three dimensions of any updating of processes and systems that you do in your organization. Yeah, in order to put these best practices in place, the people who are doing it, whatever is required to be done, are they taken care of? Are the processes well defined and mature for what is required? And is there the technology in place which will help us get the work done as required? So people, process, technology, classic framework, very important. I want to add a few dimensions to this, which is And then you have to ensure that people follow the processes. So how do you make it as non-discretionary for people and make it as easy for people as possible to follow the processes? How do you enable these processes with technology so that people can follow it easily? And then ensuring that people are able to leverage that technology with the process embedded in it in order to make sure. So any best practice that we talk about, we need to take care of these three areas which are important for organizations to look at. Let's dive into best practices. So I'm just going to cover a few of them, and we'll talk about it briefly. The first two things that I'm going to talk about is addresses this whole area of organizations need to evolve in a new way when it comes to manpower. And part of it is by virtue of things like work from anywhere. Part of it is due to aspects like cost of talent. Part of it is due to scarcity of talent. Part of it is because compositions of teams need to change. We need less clerical people, more people who can drive initiatives, and therefore the lean team in accounts payable becomes important, so that you reduce errors and wastages. You take tools which help you with the compliance, whether it be VAT, or it be GST, or it would be withholding tax, or TDS, as it is called in some countries. How do you take care of those aspects and make sure that AP team doesn't spend too much time on that? How do you make the vendor invoice processing automation aspect really powerful, so that that is a process which goes smoothly without too much intervention from AP teams? How do you ensure that those recurring expenses where you can predict, how do you automate that process to make it simple? And finally, how do you make it easy for them to collaborate with vendors? That whole old system of vendors calling up and having long conversations, talking about dissatisfaction, trying to find status of their payments, I think those are passe. We can no longer do that. We need to evolve into portals which allow self-service for vendors to know what is required. So the first part is related to AP teams. Exactly by the same consideration, the procurement teams need to be lean. And here, an aspect which becomes important is centralizing the team. So is procurement really transparent? Do people know when they are going to get something, what kind of price, why a particular vendor was selected? Is all of that available to them straight away on their screen, rather than having to engage with procurement team or people doing maverick procurement from different offices, which we want to stop if we want the good spends to be prioritized? And is procurement really auditable? So again, because this is a time when a lot of spending is going to be there, cash outflow is going to become very important, spends are going to become very important, and auditors are going to want to take care of things. So again, from a procurement team's point of view, give them things like, as supply chain forces you to quickly switch vendors, either temporarily or on a longer term basis, is supplier empanelment and information something which these people can go ahead and do? Are you having systems like RFP, RFQ, RFI, and reverse auctions, e-auctions being possible for them to go ahead and do electronically, rather than having to do it in the good old paper-based methods, which were cumbersome and time-consuming? Can we go ahead and take care of aspects like contracts management, so that from there on, procurement can be done by end user departments based on contracts which are already there, and relieves the procurement team, so that again the procurement team can be lean, can be more effective, and can be more towards serving the employees in terms of their needs, which is there. Moving forward, policies that you have, very often I have seen organizations having a system which does not give them the flexibility, and therefore they take a policy. I've taken an example here of no PO, no pay policy, and I've seen organizations getting an invoice without a PO and then creating a dummy PO and a dummy GRN, because once you put a no PO, no pay policy, then you need to do it. You need systems which allow you to be more flexible, like saying, for stationery, I don't need a PO. Even if the invoice comes directly and the proof of delivery is there, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Can you put policies like this out here? So we are talking about aspects like touchless procurement, which can be done through catalogs, which can be done through contracts which have already been put in place, so that procurement team keeps its involvement minimal, doing only those activities which are real value added activities. From a finance perspective, again, if I want this process to be faster, is the system automatically checking budget availability and highlighting if budget is not available, or even if budget is about to run out for a particular cost center or a particular kind of spend, whether it be CAPEX or OPEX, are you able to go ahead and do that? And are you getting the analysis of the spends that you have already incurred? And therefore, where should your focus as far as spending for the rest of the period, whether it be a financial year, it be a quarter, a month, whatever it is that you want to do? How do you want to go ahead and do that? So I think ERPs are not able to go ahead and this, and therefore the third best practice that I would talk about is see how you implement systems which take care of business requirements rather than business taking care of the requirements of the system, even if they are not the best way for you to run your business. The fourth point that I'm going to talk about is, and all these are things which we have seen being used very powerfully by our customers, which is why we are bringing it to you here. How do you collaborate and build relationship with suppliers? Suppliers are suddenly going to become far more important. Just like we used to have CRM, we are now talking about supplier relationship management. Suppliers need to be, especially your critical suppliers, need to be taken care of. And like I said, we are moving into an era where a lot of this is moving into self-service. So you go ahead and provide the resources like portals and things like that, which the vendor needs. You go ahead and ensure payments happen on time. You ensure that they're treated as partners as part of the entire process, so that your vendors are happy. They want to deal with you rather than deal with anybody else. And I think that's the kind of environment which we are getting into. And this is equally true for non-manufacturing organizations. For manufacturing, it is absolutely imperative. But even if you are a logistics company, even if you are a services company like we are, or you're a hospitality company, any of those industries, suppliers are becoming very important. Start taking care of the suppliers while with the right kind of processes and systems that are there for taking care of it. Another area of spend management where I've seen a lot of organizations stumble is related to small spends which are related to employees. Because when an employee, and this also happens to be an area where a lot of cooking of expenses happens. Unfortunately, that's a fact where organizations, employees sometimes charge for expenses they have not incurred, or they pad expenses. Their managers or the finance team may know, but who wants to be the guy to point out to somebody senior in the organization that, hey, this is not right? And therefore, why not, for aspects like employee travel and expense management or petty cash management, which involve these kind of expenses, why not have systems which go ahead and say, hey, you know what, you're not entitled to this, or these dates you cannot put in a second voucher because you've already put in a voucher, so that the bad guy is the system rather than some clerk in accounts payable or finance team who needs to go ahead and do it, or a manager in the finance team who needs to go ahead and point this out, or even the business manager. Let's talk about a sales team which is incurring expenses. Very often the sales manager knows what his team is doing, but he also needs them to work hard. He doesn't want to demotivate them. How do you achieve balance between this? Put it in a system, and the system will tell people if they are going beyond entitlement, or if they are padding expenses, or if they are double charging for certain expenses. Those will get taken care of. So I wanted to talk about really 10 best practices, and this is halfway through. And my request to you is look at it with respect to your organization. Which of these, you don't have to take all 10 best practices and implement in your organization. Even if you take a couple of them, and you think of specifically what can I do in my organization in terms of either just processes enhancement or going one step further and putting it into systems, that is something which would be very useful for you to go ahead and look at. So let's move ahead on that and talk about, like I said, when you're moving fast on the highway, when your organization is moving fast, sometimes there is a tendency to get focused completely on the top line. Do you have the right kind of checks and balances and controls in your processes to go ahead in this, the equivalent of a police or a radar being there somewhere along the way, which makes sure that people do not exceed certain speeds, people do not get rash, people do not do things which are imprudent, people don't break the law of the highway, all of those things which become. So you make sure you invest in the right kind of controls, prevention tools, forensic tools, whatever it is which may be required to go ahead and make sure. And this is just like the brake is what gives you the confidence to drive fast in your car. It's the controls, checks and balances which gives you the organization the ability to move faster, knowing that it has the ability to still control and make sure that you reach the destination in the kind of time that you wanted to go ahead and do that. moving one step forward on that, and this is something I cannot emphasize enough, the whole approval matrix, or the delegation of authority matrix as it is called. I've seen so many organizations, especially in Asia, where everything floats to the top. When everything floats to the top, the people are too loaded for them to be able to do meaningful scrutiny of the vouchers which are coming to them. If you put an authorization matrix, only a handful need to go to them, and people need to know what is not yet approved, what is pending approval, and what is it which is approved at any given point of time. There may be one, more than one. There may be specialized approvals for certain kind of things which are exceptions. All of those things are what a good system, which allows you to put your authorization matrix, or one step beyond that, what I call the delegation of authority matrix, which is a rules and roles based approval system built into the software so that it happens automatically, is, I think, a very important part of what organizations need to go ahead and look at. The next thing that we are going to talk about is, one of the things organizations tend to do often is get into postmortem after something is done. How do I make sure that I instead go proactive on that? And I'll just give you one example, while one can talk about a whole lot of things. Is your budget control a variance analysis, which talks about what was the budget versus what has been spent, and then you start off the process of blame and drastic steps being taken to bring the budget back under control? Or do you have processes and systems which ensure that you already know how you're doing on your budget at any given point in time? Again, that same example of a dashboard in a car to go ahead and take care of that. And I think systems need to move beyond postmortems. On a highway, you always need to have, modern cars have new systems which ensure that you keep a safe distance from others, that others don't do anything to you which could be harmful to you. And that is where, if I was to take an equivalent for an organization, it is automated and intelligent fraud control. Unfortunately, again, in Asia, the worry about fraud control among senior managers or business owners tends to be extremely high. And therefore, there is a need to go ahead and address that in an intelligent manner. And today we have great systems which are AI-based, and which not only are about tracing back, it's not just forensic in terms of tracing back what fraud has happened, but also going ahead and being able to look at that actively from the point of view of preventing them. So recently, in India, we had a large fintech company which created a fraud. They found that 6 million had been paid to vendors who did not exist, or wrong vendors were paid, or things were bought at higher prices. And that led to a whole lot of churn in the organization, investors going up in arms, CEO of the company having to resign. And then a forensic investigation is underway, and it found a whole lot of things, uncovering more things out of there. And the simple thing is a system.
Shabir, just a time. Okay. Sorry, Shabir.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah.
So something which would go ahead and take care of that could have been done if the right kind of systems had been put in place, and would have created a lot less angst than what this whole process created. To talk about the last best practice, and this is where the people aspect out of the people process technology thing that I talked about is, be clear with your people about consequences of anything wrong that they do. Be clear with your vendors about consequences of anything wrong that you do. And the best way to do that is create the right kind of policies and communicate. Let me talk about 3 of them. Whistleblower, which is more an internal thing to make sure that people inside the organization feel safe reporting if something is wrong and have that ownership about the organization. Defining that you have no tolerance and what would be the consequences of people going ahead and doing something which is not expected to them. And do you have a code of honor, which policy, which especially for procurement and the accounts payable teams, but also for other people who may be involved in any way in the spending, including the employee expenses part, which I was talking about. So these are 10, policies that I wanted to talk about. If we kind of quickly summarize it together, how do you make lean AP teams? How do you empower and create lean procurement teams? How do you have processes which are really suited to the kind of controls so that you can accelerate? How do you treat your suppliers well and build strong relationships with them? They could be critical to your growth in the future. how do you make system the one which becomes the bad guy rather than people having to do even for small expenses, because most often frauds happen with small expenses like employee expenses and things like that. How do you ensure that invoice authorization and the associated controls, checks and balances get taken care of? uh, I cannot emphasize enough the importance to define your delegation of authority matrix, proactive budgets, prevent overruns and blaming of which happens in organizations by having proactive budget control rather than just a budget variance analysis out there, so that before you spend it, checks if the budget is available. How do you ensure fraud control using some of the newer tools like artificial intelligence, which will go through your data and tell you possibilities of frauds, which you can then investigate further? And the last one, which we just talked about, is the people part, which is the well-defined policies to go ahead and take care of that. And these have come to us from a variety of different industries. And we have, seen this applied in industry after industry. It's not like any of these practices are more applicable for one type of company or another, or one type of business or one kind of geography or another. So I'm quickly going to tell you about how these policies have been implemented by different customers in different industries, just so that you can get an idea of what are there. We have a whole lot of banks who have implemented it. They're supposed to be people with very tight controls. You'd be amazed the kind of things that they found out once they started implementing a system like ours. There are financial services companies of different kind who have done it, whether these be mutual funds or lending companies or things like that. A whole lot of insurance companies, and you'll see some of the best in the world are the ones who have gone ahead and implemented and use expensing system to implement some of these best practices that we have talked to you. And partly what we have shared today is what we have learned in our interactions with them in terms of what areas they found the expensing system to be most useful for. Going ahead, we have companies in services industry. I've taken information technology. So I've just taken a few examples. Again, manufacturing is a huge area where a lot of companies in different areas of manufacturing, both process as well as discrete manufacturing organizations who have used our system. Again, services, media, advertising, entertainment, all of those kind of industries are again industries which we have done. And just to end up with last few, just to give you an example, even new age startups and companies like that in areas like crypto exchanges are the ones who go ahead and use not for profit. And education is another area which gets done. Broking, there are a whole lot of others like hospitality, etc. But I didn't want to kind of keep on going and talking about this. I just want to give you an idea about the kind of range of companies who can use a solution like this and use it meaningfully. And to help me put together this presentation, wanted to talk about the team that are there. Also, these are the people whom you are likely to interact with. So we have Mithilesh, Manoj, you already know. Mithilesh looks after the growth and strategy for us. Dipesh is India sales head, and Romel looks after Philippines for us. So these are people who will go ahead and, you can be in touch with if there is anything further you want to know about these best practices and how you can implement these in your organization. Based on past experience, lot of times when we did this webinar, people said, it was great to know about whatever it is that we were talking about there, but if we could also see how some of these things are actually happen in your system, it would be good. So this time and the last time, the first time we started, these last two times, we decided to do a demo. And I'm happy to say that you have somebody very good who's going to do the demo. So I'm going to pass this thing to Rajni, who is head of our product excellence and the pre-sales team. And she's the one who is going to, kind of take you through this. Rajni, over to you. If you can give them an idea about how the system can help them implement some of these best practices so that they have real takeaways of what they can implement in their organization.